The great chamber of the Cathar conclave was a cavity carved into the heart of a sentient asteroid, a living cathedral of obsidian and pulsing Venus light. Here, within the throne of the apex, the air itself was heavy with the weight of millennia, thick with the scent of ionized metal, cooling biofluid, and the subtle, sharp tang of collective predatory anxiety. High Lord Vorlag stood motionless on his designated dais, his four arms crossed over his carapace chest, the bioluminescent patterns along his chitinous hide glowing a deep, contemplative indigo. Before him, suspended in the null-gravity center of the chamber, a holographic projection shimmered. It did not depict a rival war fleet or a star system ripe for culling. It showed a world. A small, unremarkable planet orbiting a yellow star in a sector of space, the Cathar had long deemed fallow and unworthy of the great hunt. On this world, things were growing. Structures of impossible delicacy, like spun crystal and solidified light, rose from verdant plains. There were no fortifications, no orbital weapon platforms, no telltale energy signatures of a species bracing for the brutal realities of a hostile galaxy. There was only placidity. This was the source of the conclave's disquiet. This was the enigma of the species that called themselves humans. "It is a mockery of existence," growled Elder Lord Krax, his own bioluminescence flaring a violent, agitated crimson. His voice was the sound of grinding stone, a testament to countless campaigns and a worldview forged in the crucible of absolute dominance. They spread like a gentle mold, claiming worlds not through glorious conquest, but through nesting. They find barren rock and dead soil, and they coax life from it. This is not the way of predators, it is the way of prey, yet they expand. It is a contradiction that offends the very spirit of the great hunt. The murmurs that echoed through the vast chamber were a low, guttural chorus of agreement. The Cathar were the pinnacle of evolution's violent artistry. Their civilization was built on a singular, unwavering truth. Life is conflict. The strong devour the weak, and in this eternal galactic struggle, the Cathar were the ultimate predators. Their ships were living leviathans, grown in orbital bioforges, their minds linked to their crews in a perfect symbiosis of warrior and weapon. Their history was not written in ink, but in the blasted husks of lesser species and the silent, empty worlds they left in their wake. They were Deathworlders who had taken their lethality to the stars, and they had never known anything but the visceral thrill of the hunt, the righteous clarity of battle. And then there were the humans. Physically, they were pathetic. Scans of their distant colonies showed frail, soft-skinned bipeds with a ludicrously narrow tolerance for environmental variance. They lacked natural armor, claws, or any discernible predatory instinct. Their technology, while advanced, seemed focused on creation rather than destruction. Their ships were sleek, sterile things of metal and energy, devoid of the savage beauty of a Cathar dreadnought. They were an anomaly, a species that had somehow achieved spaceflight without first mastering the art of planetary self-annihilation, a feat the Cathar found both perplexing and deeply contemptuous. Vorlag kept his own counsel, his ancient mind sifting through the reports. For centuries, the Cathar had observed humanity from the shadows of the galactic fringe. The initial consensus, championed by hardliners like Krax, was that they were a nascent prey species, to be catalogued and eventually harvested when their expansion encroached upon territory of actual value. But they never did. They settled worlds the Cathar had surveyed and dismissed as worthless. They terraformed poisoned atmospheres, irrigated dead deserts, and built their quiet, glittering cities under skies no sane creature would choose to live. They did not challenge, they did not posture, they did not broadcast threats or displays of power. They simply were. Their passivity is a clever deception, Krax continued, his voice rising in pitch, a herald of his growing fury. A lure for the unwary. They build their nests, yes, but they build them on strategic fallow points, creating a web of influence that spreads silently. They are a disease, a rot that weakens the galactic ecosystem by replacing the thrill of the hunt with the tedium of agriculture. We must act. We must remind them of the fundamental truth they have so clearly forgotten, that the universe is not a garden to be tended, but a killing field where only the strongest survive. A wave of aggressive clicks and chitters filled the chamber, the Cathar equivalent of thunderous applause. The call to war was the deepest, most sacred instinct they possessed. It was the answer to every question, the solution to every problem. But for the first time in his long life, Vorlag felt a sliv of doubt, a cold, alien sensation that coiled in his gut. The humans were not behaving like any species the Cathar had ever encountered, conquered, or exterminated. Their strategy, if it could be called that, was so profoundly illogical from a predator's standpoint that it suggested not weakness, but a logic operating on an entirely different plane of existence. To attack without understanding was a fool's gambit. A true predator studies its prey, learns its habits, anticipates its movements. And humanity was the most unpredictable quarry he had ever seen. "And what if they are not the prey we assume them to be, Elder Lord?" Vorlag finally spoke, his voice a low, resonant baritone that cut through the chamber's fervor, drawing all eyes to his indigo-hued form. Silence fell, a deferential hush for a warrior whose victories were etched into the very star charts of the Empire. "For generations, we have watched them. They have had every opportunity to display aggression, to claim resource-rich worlds, to challenge the borders of the Giral hegemony or the Cygnian swarm. They have done none of these things. They expand into emptiness. They create where there is nothing. Is it not possible that their purpose is something other than the conquest we understand?" Krax turned his massive head toward Vorlag, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. "Purpose? Their purpose is to breed and spread like any vermin. You grow contemplative in your old age, High Lord. You look for complexity in the simple act of survival. These things are an affront. They do not fight. A species that does not know war is a species that does not know life. They are hollow, empty, a void that must be filled with the glory of righteous fire." The chamber rumbled again, the sentiment of the conclave clearly swaying toward Krax's primal certainty. Vorlag felt a profound weariness. He had led the Cathar fleets to countless triumphs. He had felt the psychic scream of a dying world through the neural interface of his warship, the Void Render. He had stood on the shattered capitals of a dozen lesser empires. The great hunt was all he had ever known, but the question the humans posed was not one of strength, but of meaning. It was a question that echoed in the silent spaces between battles, in the long, dark vigils on the bridge of his ship. When the war is won, when the prey is consumed, what is left? The Cathar answer was simple: find a new war, a new hunt. It was an endless, self-perpetuating cycle of violence. But the humans, with their quiet, patient building, suggested a different answer. An answer he could not yet comprehend, and that terrified him more than any enemy fleet. "The Prime Apex has not yet given a decree," Vorlag stated, his tone firm, a reminder of the hierarchy that even Krax could not openly defy. "We will continue to observe. To attack this anomaly without fully grasping its nature is to risk a wound from an unknown poison. A predator that rushes blindly is the one that steps into the snare." His words, laced with the ancient wisdom of the hunt, had the desired effect. The aggressive fervor in the chamber subsided, replaced by a grudging, thoughtful silence. Even Krax could not refute the logic of a careful stalk. Vorlag held his gaze for a long moment, a silent battle of wills fought in the space between their daises. In Krax's eyes, he saw the unblinking certainty of a creature that has only ever known one way to live. But in the depths of his own reflection, Vorlag saw something new, the unsettling shadow of a question. What does an apex predator become when it encounters something that refuses to be prey? Just as the tension reached its zenith, a chime, soft and clear as a breaking crystal, echoed through the chamber. It was the signal of a priority communique from the outer sensor net. The projection in the center of the room dissolved, replaced by a real-time tactical display of the Veiled Nebula, a contested border region. A single, unknown energy signature had just emerged from the swirling clouds of dust and gas. It was a vessel moving with a calm, deliberate pace directly toward Cathar sovereign space. It was not Cathar. It was not Giral. It was broadcasting a standard pan-galactic identification signal, but its design was utterly alien. Sleek, white, and shaped like a tapered shard of obsidian, it bore no visible weapon emplacements, no armor plating, no predatory markings. It was human. The conclave erupted. A cacophony of enraged growls and battle hissing filled the air. Krax's bioluminescence pulsed like a blood-red strobe. "They dare! They finally show their true fangs! This is a challenge, a direct incursion into our hunting grounds. Prime Apex must grant the order to annihilate them." The vessel continued its serene approach. It made no evasive maneuvers. It did not power up weapon systems. Instead, a new signal began to emanate from it, overriding the standard identification. It was not a threat, not a declaration of war. It was a complex stream of data, a peaceful greeting encoded in dozens of known galactic languages, followed by a sequence that baffled the Cathar linguist savants. It was a series of mathematical proofs, leading into complex astrophysical models, and then music, a haunting, intricate melody of layered harmonies that seemed to speak of sorrow and wonder in equal measure. Vorlag stared at the projection, his mind reeling. This was not the act of a scout probing for weaknesses. This was not the prelude to an invasion. This was an invitation, a message, an act of such profound and baffling confidence that it bordered on madness. To willingly enter the territory of the most dominant predator in the galaxy without a fleet at your back was either the height of foolishness or a demonstration of power so subtle it was beyond their comprehension. High Lord Vorlag, a new voice, ancient and impossibly deep, resonated not through the air but directly within their minds. It was the prime apex, the silent, observing consciousness that resided in the deepest core of the throne of the apex. You have counseled patience. You have urged understanding. The object of your curiosity now presents itself at our threshold. You will take the Voidrender. You will meet this vessel. You will discern its intent. You will not destroy it, not yet. You will listen. A wave of shock rippled through the conclave. To meet a potential enemy with anything less than overwhelming force was unprecedented. To be ordered to listen was almost heretical. Krax let out a choked sound of outrage, but he could not defy a direct command from the prime apex. Vorlag felt a cold thrill, a mixture of dread and a strange, exhilarating curiosity. The prime apex had seen the same thing he had, a puzzle that could not be solved with claws and entropy casters. As the prime apex commands, so it shall be done, Vorlag intoned, bowing his head in deference. He turned, his indigo light pulsing with a calm, focused intensity, and strode from the dais. The great hunt had taken a turn he could never have predicted. He was not stalking prey. He was going to a meeting, and for the first time he was the one who did not know the rules of engagement. The Voidrender was less a ship and more a harnessed behemoth, a creature of the abyss given purpose and a thinking mind. Its corridors were not sterile metal hallways, but ribbed, organic passages that pulsed with a faint, warm light. The bridge was a cavernous space at the heart of the beast, a symbiotic nexus where Vorlag and his command crew were physically and mentally integrated with the vessel itself. He stood on the command platform, his feet sinking slightly into the fleshy, resilient floor, his consciousness expanding to fill the entirety of the dreadnought. He could feel the thrum of its circulatory system, the coiled tension in its weapon sacks, the patient, ancient thoughts of the ship mind itself. It was an extension of his own body, his will made manifest on a scale of kilometers. It was the ultimate expression of Cathar power, a predator built to hunt other predators among the stars. And it was utterly silent. Before them, suspended in the blackness of space, against the backdrop of the veiled nebula's ghostly tendrils, hung the human ship. It was, by Cathar standards, absurdly small, a mote of white and silver against the overwhelming, chitinous blackness of the Voidrender. Vorlag's ship mind could sense the human vessel systems. Its power core was running at a placid hum. Its shields were active but not overcharged. There were no targeting locks, no electronic warfare probes, no hint of aggression. It simply waited, a picture of serene and unnerving calm. "They hail us, High Lord," came the synthesized voice of his comms officer, the thought-to-speech translation stripping the Cathar's natural growl into a monotone. "Audio and visual. They are using the open-channel frequencies we broadcast during the first contact war with the Cygnian swarm. They have studied us." "Of course they have," Vorlag murmured, more to himself than to his crew. "A good hunter always studies the most dangerous creature in its environment. Put them through main screen." The forward view screen, a swath of transparent bone that looked out into the void, shimmered and resolved into an image. It was the bridge of the human ship. The stark difference was jarring. Where the Voidrender's bridge was a dark, organic cavern, the human bridge was bright, clean, and minimalist. White walls, soft blue lighting, and uncluttered consoles. And in the center of the image stood a single figure, a human. It was a female of the species, tall for her kind, with dark hair pulled back from a face that was devoid of any predatory markings. Her features were soft, her eyes a shade of pale gray that seemed to hold a vast, calm depth. She wore a simple, dark blue uniform, adorned with no weapons, no symbols of rank or conquest. She stood with her hands clasped gently behind her back, her posture one of relaxed alertness. She was, to Vorlag's predatory senses, the least threatening being he had ever encountered. And yet the ship mind of the Voidrender registered a faint, indefinable aura of something. Not power in the way the Cathar understood it, not a threat. It was the quiet, immense presence of a deep and unshakable purpose. "High Lord Vorlag of the Cathar Empire," the human said, her voice smooth and measured. The translation software was perfect, converting her alien mouth sounds into flawless, unaccented Cathar. "I am Ambassador Alara Vance of the Terran Alliance. I thank you for meeting with us. We come in peace with a proposal for our two peoples." Vorlag let the silence stretch, a classic Cathar intimidation tactic. He let her see the sheer scale of his bridge, the intimidating forms of his command crew, the raw, barely contained power of the living warship around him. He let her feel the weight of their predatory nature. The human Vance did not flinch. She did not look away. She simply waited, her calm gray eyes meeting his own multifaceted gaze without a flicker of fear. It was like trying to intimidate a mountain. Peace is the word used by the weak to stall the inevitable judgment of the strong, Vorlag finally responded, his voice amplified by the ship, a deep thrum that vibrated through the hull of the human vessel. Your presence here is an act of trespass. Your species' expansion is an anomaly that disrupts the natural order. State your purpose, human, before my patience and that of my ship wears thin. He felt the Voidrender respond to his aggression, a low-frequency growl emanating from its core, a psychic projection of menace that should have sent any lesser species into a state of panic. Ambassador Vance's expression did not change. "We understand your perspective, High Lord," she said, her tone still perfectly level. "Your civilization has been shaped by the principle of the Great Hunt. You see the galaxy as a proving ground, a contest of strength. We do not dispute the validity of that path for your people. It has made you powerful, but we believe it is not the only path. The universe is vast and contains more truths than one." Vorlag felt a surge of irritation, the philosophical ramblings of prey. "There is only one truth that matters, Ambassador. The strong survive, the weak perish. Your species has avoided this truth by hiding in the galaxy's forgotten corners, but you cannot hide forever. You have now entered our hunting grounds. By the law of the hunt, you must now prove your strength or be consumed." "And what is the purpose of this consumption?" she asked, the question so simple, so direct that it caught him off guard. "When you have conquered a world, when you have purged its people, what have you gained? An empty rock, a monument to an ending. The Great Hunt is a cycle of destruction. Has it never occurred to you to ask what lies beyond that cycle?" The question was the very one that had been haunting Vorlag's own private thoughts. He pushed it away, reverting to the certainty of his culture. "It is not for us to question the cycle. It is for us to master it. We are the apex. That is our purpose." "A predator is a vital part of an ecosystem," Vance replied, her voice taking on a new, more resonant quality. It was the voice of a teacher, patient and firm. "It culls the weak, it maintains balance. But what happens when a predator becomes so successful that it destroys the entire ecosystem? What is its purpose then? What does it hunt when all is ashes and silence?" She was dissecting their entire philosophy with a surgeon's precision, laying bare the uncomfortable void at its core. Cracks would have ordered the ship fired upon for such heresy. But Vorlag, compelled by the Prime Apex's command and his own unsettling curiosity, remained still. "You speak in riddles, human," he growled. "Show me this other truth you claim to follow. Words are wind. Power is the only thing the galaxy respects." For the first time, a faint, enigmatic smile touched Ambassador Vance's lips. "Very well. We did not come merely to talk. We came to demonstrate. We ask that you follow us to a location of our choosing. It is close. A moon in this very system. We will show you what we believe to be a greater form of power. A power not of endings, but of beginnings." A demonstration. Now this, he understood, a weapon test, a show of force. The human was finally revealing her fangs. He felt a grim satisfaction. The mystery was about to be solved in the familiar language of violence. "Lead the way, Ambassador," Vorlag said, a predatory eagerness rising within him. "We will observe your demonstration with great interest." The human ship turned, its engines flaring with a soft, silent light, and moved deeper into the system. The Voidrender, a shadow of death and hunger, followed close behind, its weapon sacks. Beginning to thrum with anticipation, Vorlag was ready. Whatever trick the humans had, whatever secret weapon they were about to unveil, he and his living ship would meet it. The Great Hunt was about to begin in earnest, or so he thought. The location the humans had chosen was a moon the Cathar had catalogued millennia ago and designated Xylos 7c. It was a dead thing, a pockmarked sphere of rock poisoned by heavy metal deposits and radiation from the system's nebula. Its atmosphere was a toxic, corrosive soup of sulfur and methane. It was a place where life could not and should not exist, a perfect, desolate stage for a weapons test. The small human ship, the Odyssey, came to a halt in high orbit. The Voidrender positioned itself at a safe, tactical distance, its senses extended, every energy fluctuation and particle emission from the human vessel scrutinized by the ship mind. Vorlag watched, his forearms crossed, his entire being focused on the impending display. He expected a beam of energy to lance out and crack the moon in two. He expected a gravity weapon to peel its crust off. He expected some new, terrifying application of physics that would rewrite the art of destruction. What happened instead was silence. The human ship did not fire a weapon. It opened. Petals of its white hull peeled back not like an explosion, but like a blossoming flower. From its core it did not eject a warhead, but a constellation of tiny, glittering probes, no bigger than a Cathar's claw. They swarmed around the dead moon, a silver cloud that began to descend into the poisonous atmosphere. Then from the Odyssey itself, a single, impossibly thin beam of pale blue light reached down and touched the moon's northern pole. It was not a weapon. It hummed with an energy that the Voidrender's sensors struggled to classify. It was not destructive. It was constructive, complex. The ship mind, a consciousness born of battle and destruction, relayed its confusion to Vorlag in a cascade of disoriented impressions. It was like a creature that had only ever known the concepts of hot and cold, suddenly being asked to comprehend the color green. "What is this?" Vorlag demanded over the comms, his voice tight with suspicion. "What trickery are you deploying?" "Patience, High Lord," came Ambassador Vance's calm reply from his screen. "You are witnessing the power of creation, the power to turn a dead thing into a living one." As she spoke, the face of the moon began to change. Where the blue beam touched the surface, the sickly yellow-gray rock began to shift in color. The probes, now deep within the atmosphere, began to emit their own harmonic frequencies. The toxic clouds of sulfur and methane began to swirl, to break apart, to transmute. The Voidrender's atmospheric sensors went from screaming warnings of toxicity to registering cascades of nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen. The elements were not being removed. They were being rewritten at a molecular level. Nanites, microscopic machines, were disassembling the poison and reassembling it into a breathable atmosphere. On the surface, the change accelerated. The blue beam from the Odyssey spread out, a soft network of light that enveloped the entire moon. The heavy metal deposits were being drawn out, pulled into the planet's core by localized gravitational manipulation, purifying the crust. Fissures appeared on the surface, but instead of magma, they bled water. Vast, impossible quantities of it, synthesized from the very rock and air. Oceans began to form in the great, irradiated basins. Vorlag was speechless. His mind and the mind of his ship struggled to process the sheer scale and audacity of what they were witnessing. This was not technology as he knew it. This was something akin to godhood. The Cathar could shatter a world in hours, a feat of immense destructive power. But the humans were giving birth to one in minutes. Process reached a crescendo. The last of the toxic clouds dissipated, revealing a sky of brilliant, impossible blue. The newly formed oceans churned, stabilizing into shades of deep indigo. And then the final, breathtaking act. From the southern pole, a wave of green began to spread across the nascent continents. Simple, hardy vegetation, seeded by the nanite cloud, took root and grew at an accelerated, impossible rate. A world that had been dead for eons was now, impossibly, shockingly alive. The blue beam from the Odyssey faded. The tiny probes returned to the ship, which folded its petals closed, once again becoming a seamless, elegant shard of white. It hung in the silence of space, its work done. Below it, a new world, a vibrant jewel of blue and green, turned serenely on its axis. Vorlag stood frozen on his bridge. The indigo of his bioluminescence faded to a pale, shocked lavender. He could feel the awe and utter confusion of his crew, of the Voidrender itself. The ship mind, which had known only the thrill of the kill and the cold satisfaction of destruction, was now experiencing a new alien sensation: wonder. It was a feeling so profound, so overwhelming, that it shorted out its aggressive subroutines, leaving only a vast, quiet reverence. This was humanity's power, not the power to end, but the power to begin, the power to create a paradise from a poisoned hell. It was a power so far beyond the Cathar's understanding of strength that it rendered their entire civilization, their entire philosophy of the Great Hunt, suddenly and terrifyingly small. A Cathar dreadnought could kill, but a single, tiny human ship could grant life, which he was forced to ask himself was the greater act of power. "The universe is not merely a hunting ground, High Lord Vorlag," Ambassador Vance's voice said softly from the screen, pulling him from his reverie. "It is also a canvas. We choose to paint, not to tear. We offer to teach you how to hold a brush. We believe your strength, your resilience, your understanding of survival could be turned to a much greater purpose than conquest." Vorlag looked from her calm, knowing face to the impossible, living world hanging in the void. He felt the foundations of his reality cracking. Millennia of Cathar doctrine of glorious battle and righteous domination crumbled in the face of this single, quiet act of creation. The question that had haunted him now screamed in his mind. What is a warrior without a war? What is a hunter without prey? For the first time in his life, he felt the faint glimmer of an answer. Perhaps the answer was to become a gardener, a guardian, a protector of the very life they had spent eons destroying. The thought was so heretical it should have filled him with disgust. Instead, it filled him with a strange, terrifying, and profound sense of hope. He had come here expecting to find a new species to hunt. Instead, he had found a new reason to exist. The return to the throne of the apex was a journey through a maelstrom of conflicting thoughts. Vorlag had severed the calm link with the Odyssey without another word, his mind too fractured to formulate a coherent response. He had simply ordered the Voidrender to return, leaving the human ship in orbit of its newborn world, a silent testament to a power he could barely begin to articulate. He kept the visual of the terraformed moon on a secondary screen, a constant, nagging reminder of the impossible thing he had witnessed. His crew was silent, their usual predatory eagerness replaced by a subdued, contemplative aura. The ship mind itself was quiet, processing the new data, its ancient, violent instincts now warring with the raw, undeniable truth of what it had seen. Creation was possible. Life could be given, not just taken. This single fact threatened to unravel the entire tapestry of Cathar identity. When he re-entered the great chamber of the conclave, the atmosphere was electric with tension. The other High Lords had clearly been monitoring his mission. Elder Lord Crax stood on his dais, his crimson bioluminescence pulsing with a barely contained rage, his entire posture radiating furious impatience. "You have returned, Vorlag," Crax's voice boomed, eschewing all formality. "And the human filth still lives, their vessel remains intact in our space. You were sent to discern their intent, and you have allowed this incursion to stand. Explain this weakness." Vorlag ascended to his own dais, his movements slow and deliberate. He felt the weight of every eye in the chamber upon him. He knew his words now would either save his people or condemn them to an eternity of glorious, pointless self-destruction. He did not activate the main holographic projector. The image of the new world was for him alone, a private anchor to the new reality he had glimpsed. "I have discerned their intent," Vorlag began, his voice calm and steady, betraying none of the turmoil within him. "They did not come to challenge our borders or to probe our defenses. They came to deliver a message." "A message of surrender, I trust," Crax sneered. "No," Vorlag said, his gaze sweeping across the assembled lords. "A message of purpose. They showed us their power as I knew they would, but it was not a weapon. It was not a force of destruction that we could meet with our own. It was something else." He recounted what he had seen, his words painting a vivid picture of the dead moon's transformation. He described the beam of blue light, the nanite swarm, the impossible synthesis of a breathable atmosphere and vast oceans from toxic sludge and dead rock. He spoke of the wave of green life that had swept across the new continents. As he spoke, a hush fell over the conclave. The initial outrage from Crax and his followers slowly gave way to a stunned, disbelieving silence. Even their imaginations, forged in the fires of war, could not easily grasp such a concept. "Lies," Crax finally roared, the sound echoing off the obsidian walls. "A trick, a grand illusion project. To fool your aging senses. They have poisoned your mind with their weakness, Vorlag. You speak of creation and gardening. This is the talk of prey. The Cathar are warriors. We are hunters. We take what we want. We do not build." "We destroy," Vorlag countered, his voice rising to match Crax's intensity. "And what has it brought us, Elder Lord? A vast empire of silent, empty worlds, a galaxy that fears us but does not respect us. We have proven time and again that we are masters of the art of ending. The humans have shown us that there is a greater art, the art of beginning. Is a Cathar who can shatter a moon more powerful than a human who can create a world? I ask you, which is the act of a god, and which is the act of a brute?" The chamber was split. Murmurs of confusion and consternation rippled through the assembled lords. Some looked at Vorlag with dawning understanding, the seed of a new idea planted in their predatory minds. Others looked to Crax, their instincts clinging to the familiar, brutal certainty of the great hunt. The Cathar Empire was on the verge of a philosophical civil war. "Heresy," Crax bellowed, taking a step forward, his four massive arms uncrossing, his claws extending. "You have been compromised. Your spirit is tainted. The great hunt is our soul, our very essence. To deny it is to deny our existence. I will not stand by and watch you lead our people to ruin with these soft-minded human philosophies. I challenge you, Vorlag. A duel of claws, here and now. Let the old ways decide who is right. The ultimate arbiter. A challenge to mortal combat. The victor's argument would be proven correct by the simple fact of his survival. It was the Cathar way. For a moment, Vorlag's old instincts flared. The familiar thrill of the fight, the clarity of a life-or-death struggle. It would be so easy to accept, to let his claws do the talking, to prove his strength in the only way his people truly understood. But he looked at Krax, at his crimson rage, his absolute certainty, and he saw not strength, but a cage. A cage built of tradition and fear, a refusal to see a new truth because it was uncomfortable. To fight him on his terms would be to validate the very ideology he now knew was a dead end. No, Vorlag said, the word clear and absolute. It was perhaps the most shocking thing he could have said. To refuse a challenge was an act of deepest cowardice, a stain upon one's honor that could never be erased. Gasps of disbelief echoed through the conclave. Krax's face contorted in a mask of triumphant fury. You are a coward, you have lost your spirit, you are not fit to be called High Lord. I do not refuse because I fear you, Krax, Vorlag said, his voice lowering, drawing the focus of everyone in the room. I refuse because a duel of claws will prove nothing. It will only spill Cathar blood and reaffirm the very cycle I now question. You want a duel? Then I will give you one, but not with claws, with logic. Let us duel with our minds. Convince this conclave that your path, the path of endless war and destruction, is the only way forward. Convince them that the power to create a world is a weakness. Convince them that there is more honor in a graveyard than in a cradle. If you can do that, I will willingly strip myself of my rank and go into exile. But if you cannot, then you must open your mind to the possibility that the humans have something to teach us. It was an unprecedented move, a challenge not of strength but of philosophy. Krax was momentarily stunned into silence. He was a warrior, a general. His arguments were made with fleets and entropy casks. He was being asked to fight on a battlefield he had never trained for. He looked around, seeking support, but he saw only hesitation and deep, profound uncertainty in the eyes of his fellow lords. Vorlag's words and the impossible story he had told had shaken them to their core. Into this tense, fragile silence, the voice of the Prime Apex once again resonated in their minds. It was ancient, slow, and carried the weight of a geologic age. The challenge is accepted. The duel will be of logic. The great hunt has served us. It has made us what we are. But the galaxy has presented a new variable. To ignore it is to stagnate. To stagnate is to die. This is also the way of the hunt. Proceed, High Lord Vorlag, show us this new path. Krax was trapped. He could not defy the Prime Apex. He could only stand there, his rage turning to a sullen, frustrated silence. The stage was Vorlag's. He had won the right to speak, not through violence, but through reason. He reactivated the main holographic projector, but he did not show them the new, green world. Instead, he showed them a map of the Cathar Empire, hundreds of star systems, all under their dominion. Look upon our works, Vorlag said, his voice resonating with a deep, sorrowful gravity. A monument to our strength. Now show me the art, show me the culture, show me the knowledge we have gained from these conquests. The Giral had poetry etched into the hearts of their moons. We shattered them. The Signians had achieved a symbiotic harmony with their star, drawing energy in ways we still cannot comprehend. We extinguished it. We are an empire of ghosts, ruling over a kingdom of dust. We have become so focused on the hunt that we have forgotten why we live at all. What is the purpose of being the apex predator in a dead forest? He let the question hang in the air, a final, damning indictment of their entire existence. He saw the doubt spreading across the faces of the lords. He saw the rigid certainty of their warrior culture beginning to fracture, to crumble under the weight of a simple, undeniable truth. The humans, he continued, they offer us a new purpose, not to abandon our strength but to redirect it, to become not conquerors but guardians, to use our power not to end life but to protect it, to ensure that there is a forest left for anyone to live in. This is the message they brought. This is the power they displayed, the power of a future, a choice our people have never had before. I ask this conclave, are we brave enough to make it? Silence, a deep, profound silence filled the chamber. It was the silence of an entire civilization holding its breath, poised on the knife's edge of its own destiny. The silence was finally broken by a single, soft chime. A Priority 1 communique, this time not from their own sensor net, but a direct, encrypted channel from the human ship, the Odyssey. It was addressed to the conclave, but routed through Vorlag. With a mental command, he accepted the transmission. Ambassador Alara Vance's calm, serious face once again filled the main screen. She was not on her bridge this time. She stood before a vast, complex star chart, one that depicted not just their galaxy, but the unimaginable void between galaxies. High Lords of the Cathar Conclave, she began, her voice grave. I apologize for this intrusion, but our offer of alliance, our demonstration of purpose, was not merely a philosophical gesture. It was a matter of urgent galactic necessity. We showed you our ability to create life because soon all life in this galaxy will need to be defended. Her words sent a chill through the chamber, a cold premonition that dwarfed their internal squabbles. For centuries, she continued, humanity has not been expanding aimlessly. We have been listening, we have been searching. Our long-range sensors, our deep space observatories have all been focused on one thing, a pattern we detected hidden deep within the cosmic microwave background radiation. It is a signal, but it is not a communication. It is an echo, the fading remnant of something that happened in another galaxy long, long ago. She gestured to the star chart behind her, and a distant spiral galaxy was highlighted in red. A wave of energy seemed to pulse from it, an event that had happened millions of years in the past, its light only now reaching them. We do not know what it was, Vance said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Our best minds can only theorize, but the energy signature is consistent with a civilization-level event of unimaginable scale. Not a war, not a supernova. A consumption, a methodical, systematic extinguishing of every star, every planet, every flicker of life in that entire galaxy. And then silence. A collective, subconscious growl of disbelief and horror rumbled through the conclave. The Cathar were masters of destruction, but the scale of what she was describing was beyond even their comprehension. For a long time, we believed it was a historical event, a terrible warning from the distant past, Vance said, her gray eyes locking onto Vorlag's. But we were wrong. Recently, our most sensitive instruments detected something new, faint but unmistakable, tachyonic resonance signatures moving faster than light through the intergalactic void. They are not random, they are organized. They are moving from the direction of that dead galaxy, and they are coming here. The tactical display shifted, showing their own galaxy. A faint, almost invisible wave was depicted at its outermost edge, a subtle distortion in space-time. It was moving inward, slowly, patiently, inexorably. We do not know what it is, Vance stated. A machine swarm, a non-biological consciousness, a form of existence that treats life not as a rival but as a resource to be consumed. All we know is that it is coming. We estimate it will reach the galactic rim in less than 1,000 of your cycles. Humanity has not been building an empire. We have been preparing a defense. We have been seeding barren worlds, creating strongholds of life, not for conquest, but for survival. We are not gardeners for the sake of beauty, High Lord. We are gardeners planting a forest in the hopes that its roots will be strong enough to hold back the storm. The truth fell upon the conclave with the force of a phiz. Eichel blow. The entire context of human existence of their own had been irrevocably, terrifyingly altered. The great hunt they had so proudly waged against their neighbors was revealed for what it was, a squabble between children in the yard, oblivious to the wolf descending from the mountains. We cannot face this alone, Vance concluded, her voice now imbued with a plea that transcended species. Our power is in creation and building, but we lack the focused, martial spirit that you possess. We are the shield makers. You are the sword wielders. The galaxy does not need another conqueror. It needs guardians. It needs predators whose hunting ground is the darkness between stars and whose prey is the silence that seeks to devour us all. The choice is yours. The transmission ended, leaving her final, haunting words hanging in the silent chamber. Vorlag looked at Krax. The crimson rage in the Elder Lord's patterns had vanished, replaced by the same pale, shocked lavender that had overcome Vorlag when he first saw the newborn world. Krax's worldview had not just been challenged. It had been rendered utterly, terrifyingly irrelevant. His entire life had been dedicated to becoming the galaxy's most dangerous predator, only to learn that a far greater, far more absolute predator was coming for them all. Vorlag turned his gaze to the holographic map of their own galaxy at the subtle, creeping threat on its edge. The Great Hunt. It was real. They had just been hunting the wrong prey. Their endless wars, their obsession with dominance had not been their purpose. It had been their training. Millennia of brutal, violent evolution, not to rule the galaxy, but to prepare them to defend it. He finally understood. He understood humanity's calm, their logic, their ethics. It was the focus of a people who had long been staring into an abyss that the Cathar had never even known existed. His voice, when he spoke, was no longer that of a high lord addressing a council, but of a warrior who had finally been given his true orders. "Our long war is over," he said, his voice ringing with a new, profound clarity. "Our real hunt is about to begin.